Okay, so get this. A young woman, Aimee Jane Cannon, brutally stabbed 45 times in her own home.
Oh my gosh.
In West Calder, Scotland. And today we are diving deep into the court testimony and news reports to try to understand how in the world this could happen.
Yeah, it's a truly horrific case.
Yeah.
The level of violence just sends chills down your spine.
Right. And the thing is, this isn't, just about some crime statistics.
Right.
This is a human story with real people involved.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes it so important to unpack, you know, all the different factors that might have contributed to this tragedy.
Yeah.
We're talking about mental health, substance abuse, even those missed warning signs that maybe, could have potentially prevented this from happening.
Yeah. And to make this whole thing even more complicated, the perpetrator, Michael Porchetta, was actually someone that Aimee knew.
Yeah, they weren't exactly close friends or anything.
Right.
But he was known to hang out at her place sometimes doing drugs there.
Yeah.
It's just a chilling reminder that danger can sometimes be lurking in those familiar places.
Absolutely. And then, you think about his behavior after the attack.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He goes home, changes his clothes, just heads off to work.
Yeah.
And then later on, he tells his uncle about the murder, like it's just another news story here.
Yeah, almost like he's trying to create this facade of normalcy,
Yes.
like trying to just distance himself from the horror of what he's done.
Detach.
Yeah.
No.
But the evidence obviously tells a very different story.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the blood on his jeans, his DNA at the crime scene.
Yeah, there's no escaping that.
No escaping those hard facts.
And this is where the case takes a bit of a turn. So Porchetta was actually deemed unfit to stand trial.
Right.
Because of what the court called a cognitive impairment.
Right. So instead of a traditional trial focusing on guilt or innocence, they had what's called an examination of facts hearing.
Right. So what's the difference there?
Well, an examination of facts is really more about determining what happened, establishing the facts of the case.
Okay.
Even if the accused can't fully participate in their own defense in the traditional way.
I see.
So it's not about proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in the same way.
Right.
But it's still a very serious legal process.
Okay, so even without that traditional trial, the judge ultimately concluded that Porchetta was responsible for the attack, beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's a powerful statement.
Right.
It means that even with the complexities of his mental state, the evidence was just so strong. So compelling that the judge was convinced of his involvement.
Wow. And then you bring in Porchetta's sister's testimony.
Right. Her testimony adds another layer to this whole story.
Really disturbing picture of his drug use.
Heavy cocaine use.
And its impact on his mental well-being.
Yeah, and there's that quote from him, sunking him up in the head.
Yeah, pretty stark admission.
It is, and it raises all these questions about the link between substance abuse and violent behavior.
We hear about that connection a lot.
We do.
But this case just really puts a human face on it.
No, it does. It really does.
And it makes you wonder, if someone had intervened, maybe taken those warning signs more seriously.
Like the drug use.
The drug use, his behavior, Aimee's fear.
Yeah.
Could this have been prevented?
It's the question that kind of hangs over this whole case,
Yeah.
Were there missed opportunities to help both Aimee and Porchetta? Were there signs that were just overlooked?
It's downplayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're starting to see this complex picture emerge.
Yeah, we've got Aimee, a young woman trying to live her life, obviously feeling threatened.
Right.
And we've got Porchetta struggling with addiction and possibly other mental health issues, and he's just spiraling out of control.
Yeah, and then you have the people around them.
Yeah, those potential bystanders.
Right, holding pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and one of those pieces comes from witnesses who actually testified that Porchetta had been kind of trying it on with Aimee.
Oh, wow.
But she had rejected his advances.
What did she call him?
She called him just my wee pal.
Oh, jeez.
So it adds another layer to their relationship, doesn't it?
It does. Was this rejection, this feeling of being unwanted, was that a factor in his rage?
Possibly, yeah.
Was it a case of possessiveness turning deadly?
It's something we need to explore further, for sure.
Absolutely. And remember, Aimee's friend described her as being terrified of Porchetta.
Yeah, months before the attack.
Months before.
Yeah, it's like she instinctively sensed the danger.
Wow.
Even if others didn't.
It's heartbreaking to think about. But let's rewind a bit and dig deeper into the events leading up to the attack.
Okay.
We know that Porchetta's uncle played a key role in this whole investigation.
He did.
His testimony is pretty revealing.
Yeah, it really is.
Don't you think?
Yeah, it offers a glimpse into Porchetta's state of mind in those crucial hours leading up to the attack. He describes Porchetta returning home around 7 in the morning on the day of the murder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Changes his clothes, goes to work like normal, then comes home again around 5.
5 p.m.
Yeah. It's not until the next day that he even mentions Aimee's death to his uncle.
Oh, wow.
And he acts like he just heard it from friends or something.
So he's going about his daily routine like nothing happened.
Right.
Even though he just committed this horrible act.
It's a very chilling detail. Makes you wonder what was going through his mind.
Yeah.
Was it just a cold, calculated attempt to cover his tracks?
Right.
Or was this a sign of some kind of like dissociation?
Oh, yeah.
A disconnect from reality?
Brought on by the trauma.
Yeah, the trauma of what he did, or possibly drugs.
Right.
I don't know for sure.
And this is the same uncle, right?
Yes.
That Porchetta was constantly hitting up for money.
Yeah, likely to fuel his cocaine habit.
Right. And it paints this picture of a downward spiral, you know?
Absolutely.
Like the addiction fueling this decline in his mental health.
And ultimately culminating in this act of violence.
So it brings us back to that question.
That big question.
Could this have been prevented?
Yeah, if those around Porchetta, if they had connected the dots.
Right.
The drug use.
Changes in behavior.
Aimee's fear.
Right.
Could they have intervened?
In a way that could have saved her life.
It's a very heavy question.
Yeah.
But it's one we have to grapple with, you know?
It's easy to look back now
Yeah.
and say, someone should have done something.
Right.
But it's so hard.
It's really challenging to recognize these patterns in real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's much easier to see the patterns.
In retrospect.
In retrospect, yeah.
Hindsight is 20/20.
It is, but this case really highlights the need for greater awareness.
Of the warning signs.
Of the warning signs, yeah.
Of substance abuse.
Right, and mental health issues.
You know, and to be attuned to those changes in behavior.
Those subtle shifts in personality,
Yeah.
and just being willing to have those difficult conversations.
Right. And not just dismissing it as, oh, that's typical drug user behavior.
Yeah.
Like really digging deeper.
Asking the tough questions.
Considering the potential for violence.
Because those warning signs, they were definitely there in this case.
They were there.
And it's not just about recognizing the signs.
Right.
It's also about knowing what to do with that information.
Who do you call?
Yeah, who do you reach out to?
How do you get them the help they need?
Especially if they're resistant or in denial.
Yeah, those are big questions.
Huge questions.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
They do.
It's not always clear what the right course of action is.
Especially when you're dealing with someone who may be a danger to themselves or others.
Right.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah, so let's shift back to the evidence that was presented during this examination of facts hearing. What were some of the key findings that led the judge to conclude that Porchetta was responsible?
Okay, well,
Even without that traditional trial.
yeah, well, remember we were talking about Porchetta's sister
Yeah.
and how she smelled blood on his jeans.
Yeah.
That tiny little detail
Yeah,
was actually crucial.
A critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Initially, she believed the story about the barbed wire fence, but as time went on, she started to have these nagging suspicions.
Oh, wow.
And she ended up calling the police.
Good for her.
And that call was a turning point
Wow.
because it led investigators right to Porchetta's home.
And that's where they found more evidence.
Incriminating evidence, yeah.
They discovered his DNA.
At the crime scene.
Oh, wow. Which just further solidified their belief that he was the one who attacked Aimee.
Exactly.
And the judge highlighted that Porchetta had clearly attempted to cover his tracks.
Right.
But the evidence, especially the DNA, told a very different story.
Powerful evidence.
It really painted a clear picture of his involvement.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes this case so compelling.
Yeah.
Even with the complexities around Porchetta's mental state,
Right.
the evidence speaks for itself.
It really does.
But let's not lose sight of Aimee in all of this.
Yeah.
We've touched on her life a bit,
We have.
her personality, but what else can we learn about her?
From the sources.
Yeah, and the impact her loss has had,
On the community.
right, on those who knew her.
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is how her friends describe her.
Yeah?
They called her a diamond.
Wow.
Someone who brought light and joy to everyone she met.
That's beautiful.
It really is. It's such a stark contrast to the darkness of her death.
Right, and it reminds us that behind every crime statistic,
There's a human being.
right,
With a story.
with a life that was tragically cut short.
Yeah, it's her.
And it's a reminder that these tragedies don't just impact the victim.
Right.
You know?
They ripple outward, affecting families, friends, entire communities.
Sense of loss.
The fear.
The questions that just linger.
Yeah, these things have a lasting impact
on everyone involved.
It's like a wound that never fully heals.
Right.
And in this case, it's especially tragic because it seems like there were so many points where things could have gone differently.
But that's hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see those patterns more clearly after the fact.
That's the nature of hindsight, unfortunately.
And that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations, to learn from these tragedies.
To raise awareness.
So that we can hopefully prevent future ones.
Yeah, and to your point, the post-mortem findings, they're incredibly disturbing.
The sheer number of stab wounds.
The defensive wounds on her hands.
The cuts on her scalp.
Yeah, it paints a horrifying picture of the violence she endured.
It's hard to even fathom that level of rage and brutality.
It's like unimaginable.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're back to that question.
That central question.
Could this have been prevented?
If people had just recognized the warning sign.
If they had acted on their concerns.
Could Aimee still be alive today?
It's the question that just keeps coming back.
It does, and we can't say for sure.
Right.
But it's a question that deserves our attention.
Absolutely.
You know, it challenges us to be more vigilant, more aware.
More willing to speak up.
More willing to speak up when we see something that seems off.
When something's amiss.
Yeah, because sometimes
silence can be complicit.
Exactly.
It's a powerful point.
And it's not just about being aware of the problem.
Right.
It's about taking action.
And that can be so difficult.
Especially when you're dealing with someone who might be dangerous.
Unpredictable.
Right.
Yeah, but sometimes that risk,
taking that risk,
is the only way to potentially prevent a tragedy.
It could be.
Right.
And it's not just about individual action.
Right.
We also need systemic change.
Yeah, better resources.
For mental health and addiction.
Support for families.
Communities that are struggling with these issues.
Right, we need a culture
that encourages people to seek help.
Without stigma or shame.
Exactly. We need to create a society
where people feel empowered to speak up.
To reach out, to support one another.
Because ultimately it's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Our interconnectedness.
We're all in this together.
We are.
And we all have a role to play.
In creating a safer
and more compassionate world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. It's a tough topic for sure, but I think it's one that we can't just shy away from. You know?
No, I agree.
I mean, how many times have we heard about a tragedy like this and thought, oh man, if only somebody had just seen the signs.
Right. And I think we often focus on the aftermath, the what ifs. But maybe it's just as important, if not more, to think about what we can do proactively.
How can we be more preventative?
Exactly. How can we shift our mindset from reactive to preventive?
And I guess that starts with just recognizing that mental health and substance abuse, these aren't isolated issues, right?
No, they're really intertwined, and they often manifest in these very complex ways.
Yeah, it's rarely, just a simple A plus B equals C.
Right. It's not always just addiction directly leading to violence.
Yeah.
There are so many factors at play. Personality, past trauma, social environment, the list goes on.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important to approach these issues with nuance and compassion.
Yeah, because let's be real.
Yeah.
There's still so much stigma around both of those things.
Oh, absolutely.
Mental health and addiction.
People are afraid to seek help.
Afraid to be judged.
Afraid of being labeled.
Right.
And that fear, I think, is incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
It prevents people from getting the supports that they so desperately need.
Right.
And that's why we need to create this culture
of openness,
understanding, a space where people feel safe
to talk about their struggles.
Yeah, without that shame and judgment.
Right. It's about recognizing that we all have our own battles.
We do.
And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just ask for help.
Absolutely. Asking for help can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, so let's go back to Aimee's case for a second though.
Okay.
One of the things that really stuck with me was that detail about her reaching out to a friend.
Right. Months before the attack. Yeah.
It shows that she knew something was wrong.
Yeah, she was trying to protect herself.
Right, and it makes you wonder if that friend could have done more.
Right. Should he have taken her fears more seriously?
Yes.
Should he have, intervened in a more forceful way?
Again, hindsight.
Yeah.
It's 2020.
It's so easy to judge in hindsight.
Right. But it's a complicated situation.
Yeah. He was probably trying to help.
In the way that he thought was best.
Right. But it obviously wasn't enough.
Sadly not, no. And that's a hard lesson. you know?
It is.
Sometimes our good intentions they aren't enough.
They're not enough.
We need to be more proactive.
More assertive.
In our efforts to protect the people that we care about.
The people we love, yeah.
But even with the best intentions, I mean, we can't always predict or prevent tragedy.
That's true. There are limits to what we can control.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that.
It is.
You know, we can't blame ourselves for the actions of other people.
Right, we can't control other people's behavior.
Right, but we can learn from these experiences.
Absolutely, we can learn from the past.
And we can be more attuned
to those warning signs.
And become advocates.
For better mental health and addiction support.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one horrible crime.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's about this much larger societal issue.
It is. It's a systemic issue.
Right. And it's about recognizing that we all have this responsibility to create a world.
A better world.
A world where tragedies like
that are less likely to occur.
Yeah, exactly. And that starts with each of us.
It does. It starts with being more aware, more compassionate, more willing to have those tough conversations.
More willing to offer support.
To those in need.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head.
You got it.
So this deep dive into Aimee Jane Cannon's case has been really, really sobering.
It has.
And a reminder of just how complex, you know, these issues of mental health, addiction, violence.
They're very complex, multifaceted issues.
They are, but it's also been this call to action.
It is a call to action.
You know, a call to be more vigilant.
To be more supportive.
To be more proactive in our efforts to create a safer, more compassionate world.
Well said. Well said.
So if you're listening out there, you know, take this story to heart. Remember Aimee.
Remember Aimee.
And remember that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
There is always hope.
And there's always something we can do.
To make a difference.
To make a difference.
Absolutely.
So on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
If this case has raised any concerns for you, please know you're not alone.
You're not alone.
We've included some helpful resources in the show notes.
Great resources.
And as always, keep those curious minds engaged.
Keep learning.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that matters.
I look forward to it.